Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. Bells rung throughout the city as Commander Marcos is seen leading his troops with their horses through the crowd. The people of the city presented flowers to the royal knights as they head out to the decisive battle. A huge number of royal knights were exiting the city as flowers were thrown at their feet. Commander Marcos led the charge and is seen with a fierce look on his face as they head to the final battle with the Black Locust. Urk and Art are seen stationed at the old battle fort called Gestalt. She tells Art that the time has come and he agrees with her that it would all start tomorrow. Urk then apologizes to Art for having him dragged into the battle, but Art tells her that there was no need to apologize as he would do anything for her. A voice shouts out calling for Sister Urk. They turn to see that the voice had come from Fire and Orphans and they're none. Urk tells them to not come here as she had already told them to take refuge in the Isfil family estate, but the orphans had wanted to give something to Urk. They presented her with a wreath made of flowers which surprises Urk. She then hugs the little kids tightly, and tells them that they should play again soon as she would definitely come back. Art smiles and watches from the back as Urk and the orphan kids hugged each other tightly. After some time Urk reminds them that the war council was about to begin and that the children should return to the estate. Urk and Art soon bid farewell to the orphan kids and the nun from the wall they stood at. Art commented that the kids were sweet. Urk agrees with him and states that it was a miracle that they laugh right now. Art was confused for a moment by her answer until Urk explained that the kids were disaster orphans, victims of abuse, abduction and monster assaults. Urk was personally supporting their orphanage as it was experiencing some financial difficulties lately. Art gave a smile upon hearing Urk's explanation and recalled their first meeting at the guild as he tells Urk that he was glad that the orphan kids had met a savior like her. Urk looks at Art and tells him that she felt the same way just as a man appears behind her, telling her that the Order of Knights had arrived and that the War Council regarding the decisive battle will now commence. They soon decide to go to the War Council meeting together. A great number of royal knights are seen gathered in a uniformed stances. Petez and Art explained to the royal knights that there was a swarm made up of 500 billion black locusts and their queen heading towards the old battle fort Gestalt, which is where they were and which was also the last line of defense for their kingdom. They mentioned that there would be no outlook squad but instead will have 3 individual groups. The first group, called the rearguard sweepers, would be led by Ramon, the second group, called the ambush squad, would be led by Art, and finally, the last group, called the diversionary squad, would be led by Commander Marcos and Petez. After informing the royal knights of the plan to engage in the battle with black locusts, the royal knights salute the commanders. Night arrives and ambers could be seen flickering in the sky. The royal knights were having a party with a huge campfire in the middle where they ate and drank as much as they could. Art and Urk were alone with their own campfire when he mentions to her that the royal knights were having fun. Urk tells him that Petez was treating the royal knights as he said it might be their last day. Hearing those words made Art show off a sad expression on his face, but he changes the topic and talks about how Captain Fry seemed to be in a rush after they had talked with him. Urk tells him that Fry seems to be heading west with the rest of the cavalry unit. Art then mentions that Raymond and Tet were also participating in the war and that it was reassuring to have former high-ranking adventurers on their side, but Urk was upset over the fact that the Queen Locust had been designated as the most perilous S-rank hazard, which was incomparable to anything they had faced thus far. Silence soon fell upon them as they looked at the campfire in silence. A certain look came upon Art's face as he stood up. He immediately went over to Urk's side and grabbed her hand, causing her to be flustered as her face was blushing hard. He leads her towards the forest, telling Urk that he had a place that he wanted to show her. Crystal fireflies were seen, which were fireflies that were like crystals. The crystals they eat manifest on their shells. Urk and Art had wandered into a breeding ground filled with crystal fireflies that Urk mentions. Art looks back at her and wonders if Urk was going to be supporting them from the rear guard and that he was sorry they won't be fighting side by side. Urk had a silent look on her face as she asks Art if he was planning to defeat the Queen Locust single-handedly. Art was surprised to hear that from her, but he tells her that he was, which made her wonder if he was going to do it no matter what. Art tells her that it was okay and he was willing to do it for her, but Urk cuts his sentence off halfway by suddenly grabbing onto the back of his shirt. She tells him that she knew, and tightens her grip while repeating the same words. Art continued to think deeply about her words and her action. He then turns to her with a smile on his face, asking her if she remembered the time when they were talking on the terrace. He tells her that it made him happy when she said that Art was fine the way he was, and that she was the only person to have ever accepted him for who he was, and that he had always wished that he could be by her side during her happy days. But this was the first time where Art genuinely felt that he really wanted to protect someone. Art pulls Urk closer to his body, embracing her tightly in his arms, as the crystal fireflies lit the area with their blue light. With his head on her shoulder, Art tells Urk that she was sorry for making her worried about him. He continues to tell her that he was a butler whose life purpose was to do his very best for the master that he would serve, and that even if it costs him his life, he would not hesitate to do anything for her. Hearing these words brought tears to Urk's eyes. Art tells her that he promises that he would come back to her side. Urk's voice calling out Art's name could be heard throughout the forest as the moon shined brightly. As they continued to embrace one another, Art thought about the feelings he had kept close to his heart, which had ignited a flame of hope in his chest. He fervently hopes that Urk may be blessed with overflowing happiness with his determination as a butler. The moon soon turned blood red as an endless swarm of black locusts was seen gathered in the red night. The Queen Locust was leading the charge toward the kingdom. The plan to subjugate the 500 billion swarms of black locusts was a success, as Her Highness Princess Leia was able to prepare magic ores and wheat flour in large quantities. Thanks to that, the subjugation of the black locusts was a huge success. Art and the rest only needed to finish off the remaining few now. Adventurers and royal knights could be seen slicing and dicing towards the black locusts that surround them. Pettis appears on the battlefield and shouts at everyone to give these pests hell. An adventurer could be seen lighting a fire in the midst of the battle, giving off a huge smoke. Urk tells Ramon that the smoke signal had started, which prompts him to state that the battle against the black locusts had begun. He thinks deeply and states that it is all up to you now, which refers to Art, as he is seen hiding in the bushes watching the battle unfold. He sees the numbers of black locusts slowly disappear and realized that the troops had succeeded in diving their numbers, and that all he needed to do was to attack the Queen Locust. Art thought about his plan, and that even if he tried to break through with magic, he would still be stopped by the wall of black locusts, making sure that the ambush would fail. He thinks of everyone that had helped him so far and wished that those people were here supporting him. But Art brushes that thought away, as he needed to do something about this by himself. He shouts out that he needed to do this myself. The Queen Locust finally reveals herself with a smile on her face. Pettis shouts out that it must be kidding, as Art and Urk were shocked to see the Queen Locust, who was rank S, finally revealing herself. A ring of light soon appears around the Queen Locust, which Ramon spots and immediately shouts to everyone to get down as a bright light emerges from her body. The bright light came out in a massive wave, causing destruction all around to happen. A large explosion similar to an atomic bomb being set off was seen. The nearby forest, mountains and castles were seen being easily blown away into pieces as the explosion reaches for them. Once the explosion had settled down, nothing was left as the Queen Locust stood alone in the midst of a barren land. The adventurers near Pettis shout at him if he was okay, while Pettis slowly stood up and called the Queen Locust a bastard. The royal knights asked the commander Marcos if he was fine, to which he agrees. Ramon yells out if everyone was alright. Urk tells him that she was fine, but Tet was wounded when he protected her from the blast. A nearby servant yells out to the medics to tend to the wounded. Ramon and Urk looked back to where the explosion came from and remarked about its insane power. While Urk was concerned about Art, who was seen still in one piece amongst the smoke, he curses in his mind and hopes that everyone was okay. But something up high in the skies caught his attention as the smoke slowly dissipates. It was revealed to be multiple monsters of different types, ranging from dragons to minotaurs wielding a giant axe. The dragons roar fiercely in the skies as they head toward the troops. Meanwhile, the troops could only stare in horror due to the numerous powerful monsters that were coming toward them. They shouted "Mayday! Mayday!" due to the incoming monsters. Art could only think about the incident with the giant bear and the raid back then at Firen and wonder if they were nothing more than just Queen's test runs. Art immediately grabs onto his sword, determined to save everyone with his own hands. Back at the imperial family's castle, Princess Leia is seen sitting beside her father the king along with the ministers. The king asked her about how things were looking outside. She informs him that everything was fine and that she was sure of it. The king then asks her if she would not mind singing him a song, but she was confused by his request. He then tells her that it was pathetic for a ruler to be ill and bedridden at a crucial time for his kingdom, and that he was worried for everyone's welfare, which was keeping him awake. Princess Leia then tells her father that he was still a child, which shocks the ministers. She then decides to sing him a song while telling him that he did not have anything to worry about, as the person who was destined to be her future spouse was out there on the battlefield. The world's strongest butler, Art, was then seen preparing for the upcoming battle with the Queen Locust as he takes a heavy step forward. Princess Leia continues to sing the song to her father the king as Art is seen dashing forward and cutting down numerous monsters, each with a single strike and a single step forward closer to the Queen Locust. He then unleashes a flurry of strikes that cuts a monster in pieces. His eyes began to glow a bright blue light as he was determined to protect those he hold dear. Art then decides to take a moment, before closing his eyes to pray, hoping that his wish would come true, as Art needed nothing else but to just see Urk again. Ramon then calls out to Urk, telling her that there was a swarm of monsters and needed her to stay alert. Urk apologizes to Ramon and explained that she was lost in thought for a moment. A heavy thumping sound could be heard in the castle, as numerous shadows of monsters appeared close to where Urk and Ramon were. The people in the castle stood up on the walls and shouted in dismay over the number of monsters that were coming toward them. But Urk appears amongst them, shouting at them to not panic and ordering her guild unit to get into formation while occupying every ballista. She orders the remaining troops to gather the debris and to load it onto the ballistae. Ramon and Tet watched Urk give out the orders with concern. The troops shouted out that the firing squad was ready, and soon the ballistae fired away at the incoming monsters to the castle. The debris landed heavily amongst the monsters. Tet commented to Urk that it was impressive that they had stopped the monsters in their tracks. Urk tells him that learning the art of war at an early age from her grandfather had proved to be advantageous. Ramon had an intense look on his face and tells Urk that it was expected of his granddaughter to have flawless commanding skills and was glad she had stayed with them in the fort, but Urk tells him that it was her wish to be here. Ramon then began to ask her if she was lying to him, which stuns Urk. She turns her head away from him, asking what he was talking about, but Ramon could read her like an open book and tells her to speak honestly without hiding anything. Urk had a sad look on her face. Ramon continues to tell her that she was a kind soul with a strong sense of justice, but that comes with a heavy burden of responsibility, even if she tried to bury her true feelings. He tells her to remember that just because she hides her own desires for the greater good, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do, as the most important thing was to look within herself and never lie about her own feelings. Urk thought deeply about her grandfather's words. Ramon then tells her to leave the rest to Tet and him. Tet tells her to follow her heart. Urk took a moment to think deeply about their words. She thought of her wish to protect her beloved city and its people, and that to make that wish come true, she had given nothing but her all. However, she did not possess strength like veteran warriors, which was why she had chosen to be a part of the rear guards. She knew that this fight was the one that they needed to win in order to protect Firen and to protect the kingdom. Art was the core of this strategy, and she did not have the power to do it alone, but Urk still wanted to be a part of Art's strength. After all, she did not want to lie to those dear to her. She thought of all those close to her and knew that in order to protect them she needed to at least provide support. Her eyes began to flow with hope as she tells her grandfather to permit her to go to the front lines, as she wanted to protect the city with the person she cherishes the most. Ramon smiles upon hearing her determined answer, but a huge shadow suddenly casts over them as Ramon turns to see what it was. He immediately tells Urk to get as far away as she could, as he tells her that they had an unwelcome guest. The Queen Locust has once again revealed herself right in front of Ramon and Urk. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield, Art stood still as he stared at a black ball in the sky made of black locusts. His face was filled with panic as he realizes that the Queen Locust was heading straight to their stronghold. Weapons and monsters could be seen everywhere as smoke and dust covers the battlefield. Art appears once again and slices a monster into various pieces. He sees from afar that the Queen Locust was near the stronghold and thought to himself that he needed to hurry or else, but he looks at the troops belonging to his squad and knew that he somehow needed to protect the divisionary squad too. He prays that Urk was safe. The Queen Locust lets out a light swing of its scythe-looking arm, unleashing a powerful wave that sends the soldiers near Ramon and Urk flying away. An announcement is shouted out saying emergency alert. Emergency alert. Prepare to intercept. As Urk looked frustrated at what was happening to the stronghold right in front of her, the soldiers were amazed at the strength of the Queen Locust but yell out to the others that they shouldn't move forward fearlessly. The nearby mages cast fire arrows and ice needles toward the Queen Locust, but she places her hands together to cast her own spell. It was revealed to be a protective bubble that surrounded her and stopped the mages' spells from landing. The mages soon realized what had happened based upon seeing that the Queen Locust's arms were in a praying position, which somehow managed to nullify their magic. Their options to attack were now limited since their magic would not work and it was hard for them to get close to the Queen Locust. But a huge explosion is seen erupting directly behind the Queen Locust. Urk was surprised to see this and wonders if that was another spell. Ted informs her that perhaps the Order of Knights has been wiped out. But with a smile on his face, Ramon tells them that they might not need to worry as a Metalfoot clad in armor appears. Commander Marcos of the Royal Knights had finally appeared at the stronghold. He walks towards the Queen Locust while apologizing to the people in the stronghold for his tardiness as he had experienced a slight delay. Urk sees him approaching and calls it madness, which was expected as one of the Royal Knight commanders. Commander Marcos soon faced off against the Queen Locust in an intense staring contest, stating out loud that the calamity that threatens their kingdom shall be vanquished. Commander Marcos soon unleashes a mighty swing of his heavy sword toward the Queen Locust just as she returns a powerful strike of her own toward Marcos. The collision of their attacks formed a massive explosive as debris and smoke covered the entire area, even causing Urk to cover her face while she was in the stronghold. Urk stares into the huge dust cloud to figure out what the shadow was. She wonders if Commander Marcos had succeeded in taking down the Queen Locust just as a shadow became clearer, but the harsh reality was set in as it was revealed to be the Queen Locust who had won in the clash of the Titans. She flashes a smile towards Urk as she continues to hold Commander Marcos with a spike impaled through his body. Seeing this sight created a rush of anger inside of Urk. The Queen Locust then throws Commander Marcos's body to the side, giving out an evil smile. Back at the battlefield, the sight of monsters and weapons clashing continued on. Art was cursing in his mind that there was no end to the monsters. His face was filled with fatigue as he thought about what would happen if he were to stray too far from the diversionary squad, making them in danger. But the sudden appearance of a monster caused Art to react too slowly to its attack. Another explosion of dust could be seen from where Art stood. Pettis appears with a jacked right arm blocking the monster's fist. He tells Art that he doesn't look too good. Another voice calls out to Art saying that it is too early to give up, which catches his attention as he turns around to see who it was. Fry had appeared on the cliffs with the cavalry unit of the Royal Knights. Art calls out to him while Fry tells him that they were sorry for being late. The Royal Knights spotted the situation on the battlefield and reported to Fry, which he informs them that it was predicted by Commander Marcos. Fry recalled the moment when Commander Marcos received the reports of the animals in the forest vanishing, and realized that it was perhaps there were still monsters lurking due to the Queen Locust's influence. He then orders that they needed to gather the order of knights from every location and return. Fry holds his sword close to his face after recalling Commander Marcos's orders. He orders his troops to take up arms as various weapons are shown in the air. He commands his troops that it was now time to pledge to their swords and to pierce the foul darkness with its blade. "Glory to Drad! Glory!" they yelled as they marched down from the cliffs to the battlefield, just like that scene from Lord of the Rings. A huge amount of cavalry knights were seen rushing towards the battlefield with Fry leading the charge. Monsters were easily cut down as the cavalry rode past them. Pettis smiles upon seeing this sight, and then tells Art to head over to where the Queen Locust was. But Art was hesitant to leave everyone alone on the battlefield. "Just go," Pettis said. He looks at Art and asks him if he wanted to be where Urk was, and that he wasn't going to look after a kid like Art on the battlefield. Art was stunned to hear that from Pettis, but Fry appears yelling out if they had forgotten about him. He casts a primordial magic called Frozen Tear to freeze a monster that had appeared too close beside Art. Art was surprised to see Fry. Fry tells him to not get the wrong idea as he was doing this all for the sake of his precious little sister. Other adventurers such as Huey, Thea, and Brad had finally arrived on the battlefield as well. Pettis then tells Art that he may have been thinking that he was fighting alone all this time, but instead should take a closer look. As he was not the only one, Art stood still on the battlefield where his comrades were helping him in defeating the monsters all around. His eyes began to water, but he wipes them off clean, which reveals his determined face as he tells them that he was going back to where his cherished person was, and that he promises to defeat the Queen Locust for sure. He tells everyone that they should all come home back alive and that it would be a promise. All of Art's comrades agreed to his promise just as Art dashes through the battlefield to return back to Urk. Back at the stronghold, the only one still standing against the Queen Locust was Urk, as everyone else was lying among the debris. With a determined look in her eyes, she yells out as she charges toward the Queen Locust. Each time she swung at her, the Queen Locust deflected Urk's attacks, making her realize that this was the power of an S-rank monster, which meant that a moment's hesitation could mean death and that it was a gamble where the outcome was uncertain. But it didn't matter to Urk as she continued to try her best to attack the Queen Locust as she had made up her mind to fight. Urk appears in the air above the Queen Locust, preparing to strike her down, knowing that she wanted to protect the kingdom in which her cherished ones lived. But the Queen Locust had still managed to deflect her attack, but Urk was never going to surrender and continued to attack. But once again the Queen Locust blocks her attack, sending her back. Urk could only curse in her mind as she knew that she could not lose. Not here. Art's smiling face was reflected in her mind, but the evil smile of the Queen Locust was revealed as she finally unleashed an attack that Urk could not block. A sword appears and manages to stop the attack of the Queen Locust. Art had managed to carry Urk to safety with one arm while defending against the Queen Locust's attack with his other arm bent backward. Art looks at Urk and tells her that he was sorry that he was late, but Urk was confused about why he was here with her. He tells her that he needed to serve as her shield as it was also part of a butler's duty. Hearing those words brought tears to Urk's eyes. But just as they were enjoying their moment together, the Queen Locust attempts to cut them down, but Art manages to put its arm into two with a single swing of his blade. Art had now become serious. He tells Urk that they should now defeat the thing together as they both prepared to have the ultimate showdown. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.